Hello, everyone. How are you guys doing today? It's Aunt Nikki of Your Story Hour, and it's time to read our next chapter, In Too Much Salt and Pepper by Sam Campbell. And if some of you are just catching up, it also says, Two porcupines with prickly spines who make you laugh and think. That's part of what Sam put on the front. So it's time for chapter 5, A Tent House for Carol. One sunny morning, a few days after the magic night with Inky, I was wasting my time in a most capable way, trying to get Salt and Pepper to pose for a motion picture. Particularly did I want to record the highly amusing way they would sometimes box with each other. We had watched it often. I presume there was a measure of ill humor involved in it, for their talk at the time was not made of those happy grunts. It resembled the resentful blast of a cat whose dignity had been offended. The two porcupines would sit facing each other, striking out harmlessly with their front feet, apparently not liking the experience in particular, but each one too stubborn to withdraw. That morning I had noticed them start in their comic boxing match. I ran out with my camera, but immediately they stopped. When I came in to put the camera away, they started again. Once more I ran out, ready to take pictures, but the opportunity was gone. I tried to provoke the mimic battle by placing them before each other, but they were not in the mood. No sooner would I get Salt in position than Pepper would run away. When I had retrieved Pepper, Salt would dash for the underbrush. Suddenly, I noticed Jenny was standing in the cabin doorway laughing at my futile efforts. "Did I hear any helpful suggestions?" I asked. "None, but I have a bit of news for you." She came out of the door carrying a newly opened letter in her hand. "The mystery of those letters is about to be cleared up," I guessed, as Pepper ended all hope of picture-taking by racing up a tall birch tree while Salt suddenly became affectionate, was climbing up to my shoulder, grunting soft nothings in my ear. Ginny nodded. "Do you remember the day you wished for someone to join us here? The day you were so lonely for Bobby and said we should have someone around to laugh and to get in trouble?" I did. "Well, you are to get your wish. Carol is coming." "Carol? You mean our little Carol coming here?" I could hardly believe it. "Yes, I mean our little Carol. She's coming in late August. All those letters were extending an invitation, getting your parents' consent, arranging the date, and such things. Are you pleased?" I was more than pleased. I was jubilant. "Salt, do you hear?" I cried as I picked the surprised porcupine off my shoulder and raised him to arm's length overhead. "Carol is coming!" If it is possible for a porcupine to say, "So what?" with a look, Salt did it. Who was this Carol person whose very coming stirred up things so he must be snatched away from chewing my head and waved around in the air? Well, Salt, if you knew Carol, you would be stirred by the news of her coming, as were Jenny and I. Carol was a lovely girl of high school age who had already proved her ability to be sweet without weakness, beautiful without self-consciousness, intelligent without conceit. We had first noticed her when she was still a grade school child. She had attended a lecture in which we had shown pictures of the sanctuary animals. She was so taken with Inky, Rack and Roon, Bobette, and Sausage that she squealed with delight when she saw them. Her enthusiasm and animation put us all to laughing. Undoubtedly, that evening brought her parents many new problems. She must have a porcupine pet. She must have some raccoons. She wanted some bears. Already, they informed us, their house had been an asylum for every kind of creature Carol had found: dogs, cats, birds, turtles, mice, bugs, and most everything but snakes. That night she became so insistent upon having these new pets that the situation almost got out of control. To quiet her, Ginny and I said that maybe someday she could come up to the sanctuary and see our friends. This little proposition, given in the best of faith, did not calm matters in the least. It merely made her break out with her enthusiasm in another direction. All right, she would come. When would it be? Next week? Next month? Should she start getting her things ready? Carol had finally quieted for that night, but she had taken our invitation seriously. And indeed, we had meant it that way. Nothing could give us greater pleasure than to have a visitor who loves nature the way she did. But our place is not suited for tiny tots. Carol must grow a bit first. I fear when this was told to Carol, she spent much of her time trying to grow to sanctuary requirements. Often we heard from her. Whenever I gave a lecture within reach of her home, she attended. We knew of her graduating from grade school and of her first days in high, but the many new things which came into her life did not dim her enthusiasm for nature. Nor did she forget that someday she was coming to the sanctuary. If there was any change, it was only that she became more excited about the idea. At the close of her freshman year, she asked if she might come, but we felt that she was still too young to exercise the judgment necessary in our work with those animals. After her sophomore year, she might have been qualified, but we were away. Now she was in her junior year, and still the flame of interest and enthusiasm burned on. Nor had our desire to have her become reduced in the least. In fact, I think we were as anxious and excited about it as she was. But a new obstacle had presented itself. Out of patriotic duty, Carol had devoted her vacation time to war work. It seemed the right thing to do, and undoubtedly it was. You will understand it if I read you parts of her letters, Ginny was saying. Just listen to this. She says, yes, I can come. It won't be for long, just a week. But what a week it will be. Mother says I need this rest before school starts, but oh, I wonder if that week will ever come. It seems so far away. In school, I used to try to understand these long periods of geographical time, eons, ages, and such things. Now I know how long they are, like the time between now and when I come up to the sanctuary. I'll be there like a whirlwind. I laughed, placing the objecting salt on the ground. What described it? That described it. Carol would come like a whirlwind. But it would be a blessed, beautiful whirlwind stirring up that forest world to happier living. The mystery of your letter writing comes to a happy ending, I said to Ginny. What a grand idea! But now I have an idea, too. Carol shall have a tent house. A penthouse? Ginny misunderstood. No, a tent house, I laughed. I know of a manufacturer who makes a tent in the form of a house. Carol shall have a cabin of her own, close enough to ours so she will not be afraid. Another exchange of letters brought Carol's approval of this idea. A cabin of her own, a canvas cabin among pine trees. Nothing could please her more. It was some weeks before Carol would arrive, but there was much to be done. First we ordered the tent house, and in the course of a few days it arrived, knocked down, crated in a long box. It was rather a hopeless array of varied length sticks and rolls of canvas we looked upon when we opened the box. But if we did our work well, when we had finished bolting together the woodwork, laying down the floor, and stretching the prepared strips of canvas in proper places, Carol would have awaiting her a clean, comfortable cabin 20 feet long and 8 feet wide. It would be weather-tight and mosquito-tight. It would be almost touching our cabin. Putting that tent together was quite a job. Ginny and I were the construction engineers and the labor crew. We said later we could have done the whole thing in 1/3 the time if we hadn't had some help. The more help we received, the more difficult the job. For our help came unsolicited and unwanted from Salt and Pepper. The sight of all that new clean wood and rolls of brown canvas was too much for them. They actually became bewildered as to what to bite first. We almost gave up. It took nearly all of our time keeping those porkies away from our new equipment. They chewed the canvas rolling, they bit the wooden beams, they gnawed the bottom of a nail sack so that the nails poured out on the ground. It was a field day for them. What more could they want? All these grand things to chew and their human friends staying with them hour after hour just to play. And play it was for them. When we would push them away, they would whirl around and act tough. When we would jump to save some priceless bit of equipment from their devastating teeth, they loved the attention and would go nosing around honking happily. Boards had to be sawn to proper length to make the floor. No sooner had I started to do this than here came 2 porcupines on the run. 2 children headed for a Halloween party could not have looked happier than they, and for the same impish reason. Salt paused long enough on his way to tip over a small can of paint that had carelessly been left on the ground. I jumped to grab it and save as much of it as possible, and that wasn't very much. While I went to put the nearly empty can in a shed, Salt proceeded to wade in the paint that had been spilled. When I next saw him, he was leaving a trail of green after him and headed straight for a roll of our nice new canvas. I grabbed an old rag, running frantically to him, and threw it over him. Then I picked him up and carried him away. He was honking his happiest and biting his best. Scolding him constantly and furtively, I wiped the paint from his feet and tail as best I could. A call came from Ginny. "You had better see what Pepper is doing over at the flooring. She is awfully quiet." She was quiet, all right, but not idle. The handle of my saw had been chewed halfway through, and when I arrived she was just finishing the complete demolition of the pencil I had been using for marking the boards. I carried her away, not too gently, I fear, and hung her far out on the limb of a tree. I hurried back to get a stroke or 2 of sawing done before she could return, and there sat Salt on the flooring, chewing away at the bits of pencil he could find, and still having enough green paint on him to leave a footprint everywhere he stepped. Before I could pick him up, Pepper had come back, and with fiendish delight climbed up on the boards. I wouldn't have minded so much, except they insisted on being right where I wanted to saw. I am sure it was one of the happiest moments of their lives, and let me add that the pleasure was all theirs. If Rome wasn't built in a day, as the saying goes, I'll wager it was because there was some porcupines around. Once I carried them down the trail to the far part of the island, left them there and hurried to my sawing. They almost beat me back. The only way I ever got that sawing done was to put the 2 pests on my shoulders and let them chew on my head to their heart's content. And if you think that is a comfortable way to work, just try it sometime. Finally the flooring was sawed, but it looked as if it had been done with a can opener. It wasn't only with the sawing that Salt and Pepper helped. When Ginny and I were bolting the framework together, it was a golden opportunity for their talents. What a mess of things to bite, and what countless places to be. Every time we tried to drill a nail, a porcupine suddenly appeared on top of it. If we wanted to tighten a bolt, one of them would try to do it with his teeth. Whenever a new beam or rafter was put in position, both Salt and Pepper would have to climb onto it to see that it was in proper place. If we stooped over, they would climb on our backs. If we knelt down, they thought we were playing with them, and they would go whirling about, acting tough all over the place. Once, when I had been on my knees nailing flooring for some time and had become a bit tired, I decided to rest for a few moments and sat down right on a porcupine. I didn't stay there long, and through it all we listened to more porcupine grunts than we had heard in all our previous experience. They were the happy grunts. This was life as they thought it should be lived. It speaks well to our endurance that we finally finished erecting Carol's tent house. It was endurance that did it. We did not outwit our porcupine helpers, nor did we master them. We simply outlasted them. By mid-afternoon they were exhausted, which fact shows there is some justice in the world. They dragged themselves slowly and regretfully away, climbed into a tree, and went to sleep. Ginny and I would have liked to climb into a tree also if that meant rest, but this was our opportunity, and we called forth our last bit of reserve strength to take advantage of it. The framework of the tent house had been completed, and the canvas stretched on just as darkness closed over the world. And if the sun had been as tired as we were, it would have skipped next day, that is, unless it had 2 porcupines calling to it, the way Salt and Pepper called to us a very, very few hours later. That tent house stands today, with porky teeth marks in its framework, porky teeth holes in the canvas, porky footprints and green paint on its floor. But in all, we feel that it is a monument to our own perseverance, and we are proud of it. You'll have to come back tomorrow for Chapter 6, The Way of Wild Hearts, a Porcupines. See you guys later. Stay safe.